The rain hammered against the dormitory windows like accusations, each drop a reminder of the secret growing within Oluchi's womb. At 21, she was the pride of Lagos State University, a scholarship student from a humble family who had clawed her way into the elite circles of academia. Her relationship with Chijioke Okafor, heir to a petroleum fortune, had been her golden ticket to a world she'd only dreamed of. But now, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hands, that golden ticket felt more like a death sentence. "You cannot tell him," she whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror. Chijioke's family would never accept a child born out of wedlock, especially not from someone of her background. His father, Chief Okafor, had made it clear that Chijioke was destined for an arranged marriage with a senator's daughter, a union that would cement their political and economic power. The contractions began 3 weeks early, during the worst Storm Lagos had seen in decades. Alone in her small off-campus room, Oluchi bit down on a towel to muffle her screams. No hospital, too many questions, too many records. She delivered her son by candlelight, her body racked with pain and her heart shattered by what she knew she had to do. The baby's first cry pierced the night, a sound that would haunt her forever. He was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, his father's strong jawline already evident in his newborn features. For a moment, maternal instinct surged through her, and she pressed him to her chest, feeling his heartbeat against hers. But then lightning illuminated her sparse room, highlighting the textbooks that represented her only escape from poverty, the acceptance letter to the prestigious internship that would launch her career, the life she'd worked so hard to build, a life that would crumble if anyone discovered her secret. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, wrapping the baby in her only clean blanket. "I'm so sorry, my son." The storm provided perfect cover as she stumbled through the flooded streets, her body still, bleeding from childbirth. The industrial dumping site on the outskirts of Surulere was deserted, a wasteland of discarded dreams and broken promises. She placed the bundle beneath a rusted metal sheet, praying someone would find him before. She couldn't finish the thought. As she walked away, each step felt like dying. The baby's cries grew fainter behind her, swallowed by thunder and rain. By the time she reached her room, she had convinced herself she'd had no choice. Survival required sacrifice. Love required letting go. But as she cleaned the blood from her thighs and buried the bloodied sheets, Oluchi made a promise to herself. She would never love again. This pain, this guilt, this hollowness in her chest, it would be her penance. She would achieve everything she'd dreamed of, but she would do it alone, carrying the weight of her abandoned son like a stone in her heart. The storm passed by morning, but the tempest in Oluchi's soul had only just begun. Mama Adiz was returning from her night shift at the textile factory when she heard the cry, weak, desperate, barely audible above the dripping of post-storm water. At 52, she had long accepted that motherhood would never be hers. 20. Years of marriage to Papa Emeka had yielded only heartbreak and empty arms. "Chineke-me," she gasped, discovering the bundle beneath the metal sheet. The baby was blue-lipped and shivering, but alive, miraculously, impossibly alive. She didn't hesitate. Wrapping him in her own headscarf, she ran through the muddy streets to the nearby clinic, where Dr. Nwosu, the aging physician, worked tirelessly to save the infant's life. "He's a fighter," the doctor said hours later, as the baby's breathing stabilized. "Someone wanted him to live, that's the only explanation." Mama Adiz named him Amen, because his survival felt like answered prayer. The police investigation was perfunctory, another abandoned baby in a city full of them. The social worker, overworked and underpaid, was grateful to have one less case to worry about when Mama Adiz expressed interest in adoption. For 2 blissful years, Amen was the center of Mama Adiz's universe. She sang to him in Igbo, taught him his first words, celebrated every milestone as if he were born of her own blood. Papa Emeka, initially skeptical, found himself enchanted by the boy's bright eyes and infectious laughter. Then came the miracle they'd stopped hoping for. Mama Adiz conceived. The pregnancy was difficult, requiring bed rest and constant attention. As her belly grew, her attention to Amen diminished. When baby Chidi arrived, healthy and bearing Papa Emeka's strong features, the shift was seismic. Suddenly, Amen became the spare child, the reminder of their years of struggle rather than the symbol of their blessing. "He's not really ours," Papa Emeka began saying, especially when money was tight. "We're doing our Christian duty, but blood is blood." Mama Adaizi, exhausted from caring for a newborn and racked with guilt, began to see Amen differently. Where once she saw a miracle, now she saw an obligation. Where once she saw her chosen son, now she saw a burden that fate had placed upon her shoulders. Amen, too young to understand but old enough to feel the change, began to withdraw. He stopped crying when hungry, learned to soothe himself when nightmares struck, became unnaturally self-sufficient for a toddler. The bright, laughing child who had filled their home with joy became a quiet shadow, always watching, always wondering why love had conditions. At school, he excelled. Perhaps because academic achievement was the only thing that earned him brief moments of pride from his adoptive parents. Teachers marveled at his intelligence, his maturity, his ability to focus despite the chaos of his overcrowded household. They didn't see the nights he went to bed hungry because there was only enough food for the real family, or the way he flinched when Papa Emeka raised his voice. "That boy is special," his primary school teacher told Mama Adaizi during a parent conference. With the right support, he could go anywhere, do anything. But support required resources, and resources went to Chidi now. Amen learned to forge his own path, to rely on scholarships and the kindness of teachers who saw his potential. By age 10, he had decided he would become a doctor, not because he wanted to heal people, but because he wanted to understand why some were saved and others were abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd been rescued from a dumping site only to feel discarded in his own home. Chijioke found Oluchi at the library 6 months after her son's birth, buried in medical textbooks with a determination that both impressed and unsettled him. She had lost weight, gained shadows under her eyes, and developed an intensity that made her even more beautiful in his eyes. "You've been avoiding me," he said, sliding into the chair beside her. "I've been studying," she replied without looking up, though her hands trembled slightly as she turned the page. He didn't know about the pregnancy, the birth, the night that had carved out a piece of her soul. She had crafted her explanation carefully, a family emergency back home, a brief absence that no one questioned. In a university of thousands, people disappeared and reappeared all the time. But Chijioke noticed everything. The way she flinched when he touched her, the desperate edge to her ambition, the way she threw herself into their relationship with the fervor of someone trying to outrun their demons. "Marry me," he said one evening as they sat in his family's garden, the scent of frangipani heavy in the air. Oluchi's heart stopped. This was what she had wanted, what she had sacrificed everything for, but the words felt like ashes in her mouth. "What about your family? The arrangement with Senator Okoro's daughter?" Chijioke waved dismissively. "My father will come around. You're brilliant, beautiful, ambitious, everything I want in a wife, everything I need." The wedding was a spectacle, Lagos high society at its most ostentatious. Oluchi wore a dress that cost more than her family's annual income, smiled for photographers who captured her triumph for the society pages, accepted congratulations from women who whispered behind their fans about the scholarship girl who had snared the Okafor heir. But triumph felt hollow when built on a foundation of buried secrets. Their early years were golden. Penthouse apartment overlooking Victoria Island, vacations in Dubai and Paris, entry into exclusive clubs where power, brokers shaped the nation's future. Oluchi completed her medical degree with honors, established a successful practice, became the perfect society wife who looked stunning at charity galas and political fundraisers. Yet despite their wealth, their status, their seemingly perfect life, one thing eluded them: children. Month after month, year after year, Oluchi's period arrived like clockwork, each cycle a reminder of the son she had abandoned. She underwent every fertility treatment money could buy, consulted specialists in London and New York, submitted to procedures that left her physically and emotionally drained. "Perhaps it's God's way of telling us something," Chijioke's mother said during one particularly painful family dinner, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Some women are simply not meant to be mothers." The words hit Oluchi like a physical blow. She excused herself to the bathroom and vomited until her stomach was empty, then stared at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "I was a mother. I am a mother. I threw my child away." As the years passed and no children came, cracks began to appear in their golden facade. Chijioke, under pressure from his family to produce an heir, began staying out late, coming home smelling of other women's perfume. He no longer bothered to hide his affairs. After all, what could she do? Leave him? And go where? "You're barren," he said one night during a particularly vicious fight. "What use is a wife who can't give me children?" Oluchi wanted to scream that she had given him a child, a perfect son who was probably dead in a dumping site because she had chosen ambition over love. Instead, she poured herself another glass of wine and retreated to her study, where she worked until dawn to avoid facing the emptiness of their bed. At 35, Amin stepped off the plane at Murtala Muhammad International Airport, his medical degree from Harvard and his surgical residency at Johns Hopkins behind him. Lagos sprawled before him, chaotic, vibrant, unforgiving, the city that had discarded him as an infant and was now about to witness his return as one of Nigeria's most promising young surgeons. He had accepted the position at Lagos University Teaching Hospital not just for the professional opportunity, but for something deeper, a need to face the ghosts of his past. Every success in his life had been shadowed by the knowledge that someone had thrown him away like garbage. Every achievement felt like a question. Was this enough? Was he worth keeping now? His reputation preceded him. The miracle doctor, newspaper Zaiter, called him, highlighting his groundbreaking work in pediatric surgery and his commitment to treating children regardless of their family's ability to pay. What they didn't know was that every child he saved was an attempt to save himself. Every life he preserved a small act of rebellion against the person who had decided he wasn't worth preserving. Dr. Sarah Okon, the chief of surgery, welcomed him personally. "We need someone with your skills and your heart," she said, reviewing his credentials. "The children's ward has been waiting for a surgeon like you." Amen had prepared for this moment his entire adult life, but walking through the halls of the hospital where he would work, seeing the mixture of hope and desperation in patients' families' eyes, he felt the familiar ache in his chest. These people trusted him with their most precious possessions, their children, never knowing that he himself had been deemed unworthy of such trust. Meanwhile, across the city, Oluchi's carefully constructed life was crumbling. Chijioke's latest affair, with a 23-year-old model who reminded everyone of Oluchi at that age, had become public knowledge. The divorce proceedings were vicious, with Chijioke's family using their influence to ensure she left the marriage with a fraction of what she deserved. "She brought nothing to this marriage," Chief Okafor declared during the settlement hearing. "We clothed her, fed her, gave her status. Now she can return to the gutter where we found her." The final blow came when she discovered that Chijioke had been systematically draining their joint accounts, transferring money to offshore accounts she couldn't access. Her medical practice, built on connections she'd made through his family, began losing patience as former friends chose sides. Within 6 months, she went from living in a mansion to renting a small flat in Ikeja, from shopping at Harrods to buying groceries on sale at the local market. At 46, Oluchi found herself back where she'd started, alone, struggling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was living in the same neighborhood where she'd abandoned her son 25 years ago. One evening, walking past the same dumping site where she'd left her baby, she collapsed. Stress, malnutrition, and the weight of 25 years of buried guilt finally caught up with her. A good Samaritan called an ambulance and she was rushed to the nearest hospital, Lagos University Teaching Hospital. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of both justice and irony. Amen was finishing his rounds when the emergency call came in. Middle-aged woman collapsed from apparent exhaustion and malnutrition, no identification, conscious but disoriented. It was the kind of case that had become routine in Lagos. Another casualty of economic hardship, another person the system had failed. He was reviewing her chart when she was wheeled into the emergency room, and something about her face made him pause. She was beautiful despite her obvious distress, with high cheekbones and intelligent eyes that seemed familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" he asked gently, checking her pulse. "Oluchi," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Oluchi Okafor, no, Oluchi Nwosu now, I was married to—" Amen's hand stilled. Okafor. He knew that name, one of Lagos's most prominent families, the kind of wealth and power that could make problems disappear, including unwanted babies. As he examined her, running tests and ensuring she was stable, he found himself studying her features with growing unease. There was something about the shape of her eyes, the curve of her lips, that echoed his own reflection. But it was when she looked directly at him, her gaze focusing clearly for the first time, that the world seemed to tilt off its axis. "Doctor," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you look like... you remind me of..." She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. In that moment, 25 years collapsed into a single point of recognition. Mother and son staring at each other across the debris of choices that had shaped both their lives. Amen's professional composure cracked. His hands shook as he set down her chart, his mind racing through possibilities, calculations, the terrible mathematics of abandonment and survival. "When?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "When did you leave your baby?" Oluchi's face crumpled. "How did you—" "The dumping site in Surulere. 25 years ago, during the storm." She began to sob, deep, wrenching sounds that seemed to come from the very core of her being. "I was 21. I was so scared. I thought it was the only way." "The only way to what?" Amen's voice was quiet, clinical, but underneath ran currents of pain that threatened to pull him under. "The only way to marry your rich boyfriend? The only way to have the life you wanted? You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Amen stepped back, creating distance between them. "I understand that you threw away your child because he was inconvenient. I understand that you chose wealth over your own blood. I understand that while you were living in mansions and wearing designer clothes, your son was wondering why nobody wanted him." Oluchi reached out to him, but he moved away from her touch. "I thought about you every day. Every single day. I wondered, if you were alive, if you were happy, if you could ever forgive me." "Forgive you?" Amen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what forgiveness costs? Do you know what it's like to succeed in spite of abandonment? To save other people's children while knowing your own mother threw you away like garbage?" "Please," Oluchi whispered. "I was young. I was terrified. I didn't know what else to do. You could have chosen differently. You could have kept me. You could have found another way." Amen's voice broke slightly. "But you didn't. You chose the life you wanted over the life you created." For a long moment, they stared at each other, the woman who had given birth to him, and the man he had become despite her choice. In his eyes, she saw the ghost of the baby she had abandoned, grown into someone extraordinary. In her face, he saw the woman whose love he had craved his entire life, now broken and alone. "I loved you," she said finally. "I held you for an hour, before I loved you so much it nearly killed me to let you go." "Love doesn't abandon," Amen replied. "Love doesn't choose convenience. Love doesn't throw away what it's supposed to protect." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You'll be fine. Physically, at least. Rest, eat properly, take care of yourself. That's what mothers are supposed to do." "Wait," Oluchi called out, desperation in her voice. Can we try? Can we find a way forward?" Amen turned back to her one final time. "I forgive you," he said quietly. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I forgive you because carrying hatred for 25 years is a burden I'm finally ready to put down. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. He walked away then, leaving Oluchi alone with the weight of her choices. She had found her son, alive and brilliant and successful beyond her wildest dreams. But she had also lost him forever, because some abandonments are too profound to overcome. As Amen continued his rounds, saving other people's children with hands that were steady and sure, he carried with him the knowledge that he was finally free from the question of whether he was worth keeping, free from the shadow of a mother who had chosen poorly, free to be exactly who he had made himself, not despite his abandonment but because of how he had chosen to rise above it. The circle was complete. The abandoned child had become the man who saved abandoned children. The mother who had thrown away love would spend the rest of her life learning to live without it. Some stories end with reunion and redemption. Others end with the harsh truth that some wounds are meant to be honored, not healed, carried as reminders of the weight of every choice we make and the children who survive them.